Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, the president of Dale Carnegie Training Tokyo, Japan. And my special guest today is an old friend of mine, Mitch Kristofferson, who is the director of Japan for UpClear.
UpClear.
Mitch, well, you've been in Japan a couple of times and you've done a number of things here, but let's go back to the very beginning. What's the background here? How is it that you are in Japan a number of times, and what have you been doing here?
Yeah, so exactly. I first came to Japan when I was a university student, by accident, actually. I had gotten to college and was looking for something to do overseas, and Europe didn't quite feel right to me for a number of reasons, and Asia felt better, but the only Asian country I knew at the time was China, so I applied to go to China as my sort of study abroad, experience abroad.
Which uni were you with?
I was at Stanford.
At Stanford,
yeah,
right? So Stanford's got these overseas programs.
All kinds of stuff.
Great.
And this, and for one reason or another, they didn't see that I was fit for China in the 80s, early 80s. But they said, you can go to Japan if you want. And I said, Japan, where's Japan? But I really had been looking forward to going. And so I said, sure, I'll go to Japan. And so here I came. And I was posted in Yamaguchi prefecture at a teaching hospital there. So the Yamaguchi teaching hospital is in Ube. And I was posted there for 6 months. I was a pre-medical student in college, so there was a good fit there.
That's the connection with the medical teaching?
That's why it all happened.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah. And that hospital basically had guys like myself or people like myself flow through twice a year, once a year, just to kind of help them deal with the outside world. Medical is very global, but when you're in Ube, that's maybe a stretch. And so we were always sending people, and I was one of those guys.
Ube, is that a mining town?
Yes.
When I hear the word Ube, I think mining for some reason.
So the big conglomerate there was Ube Kosan, Ube Mining.
Right.
So cement and that kind of thing. Right. And that was really all that Ube and Yamaguchi had at that point.
So when you arrive in Ube, I can't imagine the place has got massive numbers of foreigners running around, and there's probably not much English being spoken down there at that time. So how did you get on?
There were 3 foreigners in the town, including myself, and there was 0 English. I spent a pretty lonely first 3 months not being able to talk to really anybody, except the doctors in the hospital. That was English was pretty good there. But yeah, outside of that, I didn't have much of a social life going on.
So when you were at Stanford, there was no sort of Japanese language classes prepping for you for this?
Well, I was taking Chinese classes because I was sure that I was going to be sent to China. And so I came to Japan with really no Japanese, went to Ube with no Japanese. Right. I think my sponsor was a little bit surprised and all that, but there I was. Second half got a lot better, and I really grew to like Japan and the culture, and that led to me coming back later on in life.
Right. Yeah. So you finish up and you go back home, and do you continue in the pre-med, or do you change courses? Or
I continued in the pre-med because I was already halfway through it, but I started taking Japanese courses along on the side, and they're the only courses where I was getting A+ with almost no effort. And so the organic chemistry and that kind of thing was going, but the Japanese stuff was going much better, and so I just took a liking to it for one reason or another, and that became kind of my thing later on.
So you graduate, and then what happens then?
So I graduate, and I spend a year on campus helping facilitate the programs of which I was a participant as a student. And in coming to Asia so often, I developed contacts here in Japan, and ended up landing a job at Nissho Iwai, which was an old trading company, now it's Sojitsu. Yeah. And landed a sales job there in offshore oil exploration, another subject which I didn't know very much about.
An obvious next extension from pre-med.
For a pre-med guy.
Straight into the oil exploration area.
Right, but you know how large Japanese companies work, and so they hire you, and they basically are going to teach you everything you need to know.
And so this is Sojitsu, Nissho Iwai at that time. Yeah. So how long you were at Nissho Iwai?
I was there for 5 years.
Well, that's quite a respectable period of time.
Yeah. And my focus was really on the foreign vendors that they had in that department. So seismic surveys, oil field equipment. A lot of that was coming in from foreign vendors. Now, Japan doesn't have a big oil exploration industry or opportunity here, as you know. But Japan oil companies were starting to get much more involved in overseas projects, whether that be in Indonesia or other places.
Was this part of the idea to get in early to get supply, to guarantee supply for Japan?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're at Nishio Iwai, so you're basically you're their guy to round up all these foreign clients and wrestle them down and get the deals done. So you're probably not actually leading a team at that stage, or
No.
You're an operator. Basically.
I was the front line.
You're the guy.
Yeah.
Right. But you're getting a sense of how Japan operates. The trading companies are very businesslike. They're very pragmatic. They're very hardcore. They're very fast paced. So that would have been a good insight into how things work here too, I imagine.
Oh, for sure, and a lot of exposure to a lot of different people and situations, and strong business people. It turns out that the kacho that basically brought me in ended up to be president of the company 20, 25 years later.
So your kacho becomes the prez.
Of all those kas in that company.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, he wasn't adorned with that path. He earned every yen that got him there. But that's who I ended up working with. So yeah, it was great exposure to.
And you still have a connection with him?
Yeah.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. The thing about Japan, I love about Japan, when you get those really strong connections, they stick. It's a sticky relationship.
If you make just a little bit of effort, you can really keep them going for really a lifetime. Yeah.
So next stage, what happens after 5 years on the oars, on the good galley slave ship Nishio Iwai?
So this was a rough go. This was a rough go.
Sure
it was no picnic. So 5 years was pretty much what I could handle, and I wanted to go back to the U.S., get an MBA degree, and then work for Nishio America. That was my plan.
So you did the MBA?
I did. I went back to Stanford. I went back to Stanford, did an MBA, and I wanted to work for NIAC, Nishio America, but they wouldn't pay for my MBA. Probably because I wasn't Japanese. There was a program to send people over, but I think at that time in the 80s, that was just a little bit much of an ask. And so I, to cut off my nose to spite my face, I said, okay, see you guys later. And once you get into a business school like that, really the world is your oyster coming out of it. And so that's what happened. I got into IT and marketing and very different stuff in Silicon Valley after I graduated.
And yet you say you joined Nishio Iwai in the States.
No, I joined here in Tokyo.
Sorry, let me get this straight.
Yeah.
So you're coming out of MBA course in Stanford Business School.
Yeah.
Beautiful campus. I've been there.
Yeah.
Did
heaven on earth.
2 weeks of strategy there, and I thought, damn, this weather's.
Why would you want to leave here?
Why would you ever leave here? This is great. Anyway, that's enough about me. We're here to talk about you. So then what happens after you graduate? You come back here to Japan, or you get something else?
So I did 5 years at Nishio. I got my MBA degree, and then I spent about 20 years in Silicon Valley doing IT marketing for tech companies.
Right.
So
another logical extension from oil exploration.
A little bit of a zigzag career I've had, but it's all worked out. We raised our children in the States.
Right.
They're half Japanese. My wife's from Osaka originally. But we basically raised our family in the States. When they got out of the house and we became empty nesters, we looked at each other and said, what do we want to do with the rest of our life? And coming back to Japan seemed attractive for both of us. So we made the big jump back here.
And did you make the big jump with a job to come to, or you just came?
I did. No, I was hired by a software company in Silicon Valley to come open a Japan office.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so I got my.
What was the name of this company?
It was called Aptus. Now it's called Conga.
Called what?
Conga.
Conga.
Yes.
Conga line.
Yeah. Tech companies, there's so many of them, they really have to search hard for names, and you get some interesting names. So Aptus Conga was the company that hired me to open the Japan office.
So, okay, you arrive in Japan. Okay, Mitch, go conquer Japan. So you arrive, you speak Japanese, you know Japan very well. You've got probably pretty good connections through your Nishio Iwai days. I guess. I'm not sure if that's continued. 20 years is a long time.
Yeah.
But anyway, and so you've got to go out and hire people.
Yeah.
And, okay, please come and work for Conga. Well, actually, it wasn't even called Conga then. What was it called originally?
Aptus.
Aptus.
Aptus. Yeah.
Aptus. That's you can't even say Aptus. It's a difficult word, Aptus. Come and work for Aptus. Who's Aptus? Who are you?
Sure.
So, you've got this quite big disconnect between, I'd rather work for a Japanese company than work for an unknown Silicon Valley company in tech.
Yeah.
So how did you get people to buy in to the Appitus story?
Yeah. So what I really needed were people that could sell into large enterprises with very little behind them. So they needed to be highly capable individuals. And ideally, because the company that I was with was built on top of the Salesforce.com platform, I needed people that were familiar with Salesforce. So that was my target. And I just used nothing related to niche UI or anything like that, but just a few contacts that people in the home office had in Japan. I sort of pulled those threads together, met a few people that knew a few people, and ended up building a starting team who were everything that I hoped for. Highly capable, new Salesforce, and off we went.
Wow, that sounds great. How many did you hire initially?
Just two, so it was the three of us.
Three of us, okay. That sounds back on the slave galley oars to me. That sounds hard.
Well, it was a lot of fun.
I'm sure.
It was a lot of fun. The hardest part was trying to build a market where there was none, meaning Japanese companies weren't buying the kind of software that we were offering. And trying to create a market from scratch turns out to be really hard, especially in Japan. And
what was the problem the software was solving?
So large companies need to quote solutions, especially in a B2B context, that are highly complex. So if you think of the telco solution that is supporting this building, that estimate, that quote, was many, many tens of pages long with a lot of content in it. Our system built those quotes in real time on top of Salesforce. So customers using their CRM, Salesforce, they say, I need a quote to go out to Greg's very large company, and our software would pull that together. So you can think of it as like shopping on Amazon times 1,000, with a lot more power required and configurability behind the scenes, but it can't take hours to do that. You don't want to wait an hour.
And this does it in Japanese too?
Yes.
So
yeah, well, we had to get it to Japanese.
Yeah, yeah. There was no language barrier there. Yeah, so they could come in English.
No.
So how long did you do that for?
So I did that for 3.5 years.
And at the end, how many people did you build it to?
So we built it to 8 people.
8 people, right? Which would have been hard yards all the way, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was a good team.
Yeah, and so, this is your first, well, I guess, I don't know, when you're in the States, you must have had some degree of management or leadership experience when you were working or were you the guy coming through the front door to do the deals? Because I'm interested in your Japanese initial leadership experience as this new company, but what happened before that?
So what happened before that was another big job. I spent 5 years at SAP as the CMO of SAP Japan.
All right. Oh, okay. That's a pretty big important thing. You just dropped that one right out there. Okay. So you're back to Japan for SAP.
I did have that in there, yeah.
Right.
That was leading a team of 25 people.
Right, so that would have been your first leadership experience.
Yeah.
In Japan, and probably, how about in the States? Is that one of your first experiences?
I had every company I was head of marketing in the States, but they were all pretty small teams,
right? So
all American.
So I'm looking for that comparison, right? I'm leading American teams, or quite probably diverse teams in America, probably.
Yeah.
And now I'm SAP in Japan. I'm the CMO.
Right.
I've got a Japanese team. They're already there. You turn up. They're already there.
Yeah.
So you're not recruiting them like you did at Appitus. These are your guys and gals. This is somebody else's guys and gals.
Right.
You're inheriting them.
Yeah.
So what was that like? What were some of the challenges you found coming in, parachuted in, existing team? You're the guy. How did that go?
Yeah. The challenges were mostly around, the biggest ones were around what the company needed to do and how marketing was going to support that. So this was in around 2010 when I did this, from 2010 to 2015. And at that point, SAP needed to transform as a company, starting in Waldorf, Germany, but around the world. And what it needed to do was kind of shed its old ERP legacy, who wants to think about that anymore, kind of skin, and become a new company based on much faster speed, much cooler and sexier technology, and a much more aggressive go-to-market. And that needed to happen worldwide. That was a worldwide transformation. And Japan needed to do its part, its share, in order to make that happen here. And so that was a massive change that I had to support from the marketing perspective, not only in terms of the marketing that we would do, but how we got on as a team. how we showed up to the job, how we thought, and of course what we did.
Was there any money attached to this effort in terms of budgets? Because I love these big, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals with no money attached. If you've got the money attached, that makes a big difference for the team in terms of the firepower. But when you don't have enough money attached, but the job is still at a vast scale, that's where it gets a bit exciting. So how was that?
Yeah, the new money wasn't there. So
I was hoping you were going to say, no problem. They gave us tons of dough. It was a smooth ride. The team were happy. Not happening.
No. Basically, the company was managing the marketing spend down a little bit every year and managing the KPIs up and expecting us to be better, faster, and smarter.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, which is not an uncommon pattern in business overall. Yeah,
So that was the team who've been doing a good job. Suddenly now you're like, hi, I'm from head office. By the way, this is how we're going to roll around here from now on.
Yeah.
Less money, but more outcomes required. And,
different outcomes, yeah.
You guys need to work a bit harder here. And smarter. So how did you go around getting them to understand the direction? Because it's it's a global direction. It's not like you're having some moment and you're coming up with some bizarre idea. You're actually in trend.
Right.
But they're not perhaps understanding that so well. So how did you go about getting them on board with the idea?
Good question. Yeah, doing it wasn't an option. It was obvious the overall direction we needed to take. How you do that was a challenge. And there's multiple threads of leadership or activity, et cetera, that sort of combine to achieve that. It's not just one thing. First of all, you got to paint a very clear picture of, in your department, where things need to go. And of course, the response from most people is, well, we can't do that. It hasn't been done before, therefore we can't do it. But not everybody will say that. There's always a couple of early adopter, innovative types in your team that are eager to jump onto the new thing, and they do. And so they take a little bit of leash and get some stuff done and are successful. And people say, well, he sits right there and he's getting it done. Maybe I can do that, in my area. So there's a whole group in the middle that then give it a shot. And then there's maybe another group of laggards that just don't get it. And you kind of have to deal with each group differently, I think.
So how did you deal with each group differently?
Well, you want to give
let's
these...
Let's start with the laggards. That's the exciting part, right? Go straight to where the problem point is.
A lot of coaching, a lot of one-on-one, let's get up this hill together kind of stuff. At the end of the day, not to be dark or anything, but not everybody is ideal for every job in every company. And so
particularly too when companies' direction change, like your fit for purpose on being hired can often become irrelevant as the company direction changes and the business changes, and suddenly you're now surplus to a requirement, right? And next thing you're out the door.
Right.
That certainly happened to me in my life, in my business career. That's hired here, but then the ground shifts underneath you.
Yeah.
Goalposts are suddenly reoriented, and you're reoriented too.
Yeah.
Out the door. So how did that go?
It was fine, as long as you do things properly. And in Japan that people are really protected in maybe ways that they're not in California or wherever. And so you got to approach every situation like that with a lot of care and genuine concern and process and time. And at the end of the day, you'll end up with someone who is performing better than they were before because of that process, or you'll end up with someone who is more excited about looking for the next thing. And so, it wasn't overly hard, but did take a lot of effort.
Well, it's one of those sort of typical sort of curves, isn't it? You got the sort of early adopters over here, you got the late adopters over here, and the bit in the middle.
Yeah.
What was your strategy for the middle bit?
So I wanted them to do as much as they could to try new things. In order to do that, you have to have new ideas, and so you got to source your ideas. And if they're not in your head, which in the middle often they're not, the most likely place to look is with the sales team, right? They're with the customer every day, and they usually have ideas. And so if you can just engage them enough, you might get some great ideas from them. And so they would regularly engage the sales team as part of doing their job, weekly sales meetings, et cetera. But I tried to spend as much as I could in those meetings too. Now there's 25 sales groups there. I can only be in one meeting because they happen at the same time, Monday morning at 9 a.m. But getting as much as I could into those meetings directly.
Sorry, did you just say there were 25 sales groups?
Yeah.
How many people are you talking in this?
1,200.
1,200, right? So
Yeah.
you're the CMO for 1,200,
Yeah.
and you've got to get these people going in one direction.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Yeah, but it turned out to be very doable if you made the right effort and along the right vectors. So it wasn't too bad. And I would just honestly try to support my team in the best way I could, and it might be being in the same meeting, listening to the same sales VP give a speech, the kickoff of the week, and maybe hearing something different or hearing something in a different way or saying, no, this was said, we cannot let that go. This is what they want. Salespeople usually know what they want. And if you can give them that as a field marketing team, you're a long way towards success, as opposed to making plans in the ivory tower. That usually doesn't work.
How did you use the early adopters?
Oh, they used me.
They used you.
Yeah, I mean, they were off and running. They had more ideas than could be executed in 5 years for year one. So these were people that ended up to be CMOs themselves pretty quickly after leaving my team. So yeah, they were very talented, very capable.
You became the guy for creating the bench strength for the CMO department, right?
Yeah, no, so I did bring in a fair amount of new talent from all kinds of sources, from other departments. So if you see a rock star in professional services, for example, you want to bring that person in. That person's now currently CMO of the company. So they hadn't done marketing before, but if they've got all the skills that you need, that's precious. And so you try to bring those people into what you're doing. And bringing people from outside was obvious, and we did a fair amount of that. Yeah.
So this is what, 5 years?
Yeah.
Was it 5 years,
Yeah.
right? And was back to the States again?
Yeah, for a short time, we were getting taken to the cleaners by our landlord. We had our dream house in California. Landlord and tenant were just not treating us very well. It was impossible to manage from here. So we went back to get back into our dream house for a short time, clean all of that up, sell it, and then I came back to Japan
So
with
Aptus. You're renting the property out.
Renting
so
it out.
Realty company managing or mismanaging the property.
Yeah.
Tenants trashing the place.
Yeah.
And it's a crack lab or something instead of being a normal residence.
That's not fiction, actually.
No, I mean, in the States, too, in America, that's probably how it works, right?
We had a little storage shed that we had custom built that was a mini-me version of the big house, same construction, shape, and same paint. And they turned that into the drug lab.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Americans are so entrepreneurial. Yeah. So, okay, you go back, you clean all that stuff up. So when's the next iteration back in Japan?
So, yeah, then I came back probably in 2016 to do this Aptus country manager post.
So what's the time gap here between the SAP and this one?
Like a year.
Oh, it's pretty close. Okay.
Yeah, pretty close. And I was doing work in SAP Palo Alto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. So at the time, the global CMO happened to be located in Palo Alto. Oh. Couldn't have been anywhere in the world. But Jonathan Becker was in Palo Alto.
Well,
so
he was in Palo Alto. What a great place to locate yourself.
Yeah, and he's now president of the San Jose Sharks, by the way, the NHL hockey team. So he's had an amazing career. He's an amazing guy. Yeah. And of course, he had a job for me, so I did that while I was sort of working things out. It was great. Right. Yeah.
And so what made you come back to Japan? You've had your Japan little hit there. Why go back again? Yeah,
it was really what my wife and I saying, what do we want to do with the rest of our life and where do we want to be? And she had put 20 years into Silicon Valley. She had a teaching career there by then. She was doing pretty well, but she wanted to do more. And she had really topped out of where she could get in Silicon Valley. I'd spent 20 years doing field marketing or general marketing and had kind of grown to want to do something else. When you're marketing, you don't spend a lot of time working with customers directly, eye to eye, over matters of consequence. And that's what I wanted to do.
You're one step removed, aren't you?
You are. Yeah, you do meet them at events and so forth, but it's not over matters of consequence. No. And that's what I wanted to do before I finished my IT career is do that. So I came to become country manager here of Aptus and start that from zero.
Right.
It was a great sort of turning point for me to get out of marketing and into, in that case, general management, but really selling, and then later professional services and projects.
Well, what you said, you started, what, two people, was it you said?
It was myself and two others that were.
3 people, and you built 2 staff, and then you built it up to 8.
Yeah.
So in those sort of small operations, you're doing everything.
Yeah.
You know, and you're the lead everything.
Yeah.
And so that's always hands on deck type of activity, isn't it? And so you do that for a little while. How many years?
Yeah. 3 and a half.
And then you make a move.
Yeah, so that company was acquired by a private equity firm. Well, first of all, it was just acquired by a private equity firm. And they shut down Asia pretty much.
Whoa.
So we probably had 8 people in Japan and another 8 to 10 in Asia overall. So call it 15, 20-ish. And they really took that down to 2 in Asia. So yeah, there was a lot of cost cutting done by the private equity firm immediately upon acquisition. And I had to let my entire team go almost overnight. It was kind of sad. I was pretty upset about it. It turns out it's a pretty common private equity play, card to play, as they look to acquire companies, take cost out, combine them, and then sell that off as.
Flip them.
Yep.
That's why we love PE, right?
Yeah. So I really didn't see it coming. I really wasn't that experienced in that world before. But that's what happened.
Well, you imagine they've got a running business. They're going to be a steward of the business. They're going to try and expand the business and make it more successful. All they're thinking about is how much money can we strip out? We can flip it.
By that time, I was really emotionally committed, and so this was an affront to my emotions at some point. Yeah.
Don't worry, I'd be the same. I wouldn't be very happy about it. So you're now out of a job.
I'm out of a job. The customers were really upset. This is interesting. So they said, do you realize one of the key reasons we chose you is because of the team you have here? And in fact, our first big deal, which was with a large telco company, we ended up beating Oracle, the 3 of us, against Oracle Japan.
Wow. Which is a huge operation here.
And the customer said, they outshone you on almost every step, frankly speaking. The presentation's better than yours, they're more professional than you are, and they just went down the list. But we believe you guys can get this done. And they gave us the contract. And that really...
By this time you're crying because this is really hurting, right? Thanks for telling me that.
It was great. So we were all in, then we were shut down. None of the customers ended up leaving, though. They're still using the software to this day. And I think that's a testament to the work that I and my team did.
Yeah.
It was real work. Otherwise, if it wasn't, they would have found a way to just stop it and move it on.
So then how do you get the next job?
So a contact of mine asked me to start, or actually take over an operation here. So I did. It's small, a small number of customers here in Japan. But I started...
It's an unusual name. What's the business?
UpClear?
UpClear, what the hell is that?
Yeah. So this is completely CPG focused. So food, beverage, household items, okay? These companies spend an unbelievable amount of their revenue on what's called trade promotions.
Okay.
So if you go and you get a free sample in a store, almost always that was paid for by the manufacturer. It's actually a very complex process, what they do. The amount of money is significant. So if you're a $10 billion CPG company in Japan, you probably spend $1 billion or $1.5 billion every year on this trade promotion stuff.
Wow, it's a huge percentage.
It's huge. It's after COGS, after cost of goods sold, it's the second largest on the P&L. Companies around the world.
Are we talking US billion?
US billion. Yeah. It's 10 to 15% of revenue.
That's huge.
Now it depends on the market.
Yeah.
In Australia, it's gone to 20 and 25. Why? Because there's been such a consolidation of retailers in Australia.
Yeah.
They can say, pay up. And the manufacturers, if they've got the margin, will do it.
And all those Aussies who want something cheap or free, so they get the sample, they're happy.
But it's also competing for shelf space.
Yeah.
So if 7-Eleven takes your favorite flavor of drink off the shelf suddenly and puts another one there. That takes work. They've got inventory, they've got to deal. So a lot of times the manufacturers are paying for that work, et cetera, et cetera. These things take 15 to 20 different forms. The most simple one is just a long-term price discount. You buy 10,000 cases this year, I'm going to give you 500 yen a case off, whatever it is. So all this money's sloshing around, and it's either managed by the ERP system in a pretty kludgy way, because the ERP system is built to feed the ERP system. It's not built for those users that have to deal with this, which are sales users, finance users, et cetera. Or it's managed in Excel. Right, those are the two.
It's a pretty big extreme.
Yeah. In America and Europe, other markets, companies like us, there's a half a dozen of us that are specialists.
Right.
And we show up and we're a little cheaper than the big guys.
Right.
And we do the job well. And we earn our fair share of a market share. But in Japan, this is all homegrown software still.
Oh, okay.
Software that the company's built, because you can't have $1 billion spend and not manage it with software, right? So these are homegrown systems. And so my first job was to take care of the customers that the company had got without anybody here, and shore those up, implement, project manage, whatever I needed to do. And now my role is bifurcated. I do about half of what's called customer success and half new business development. So I have a sales role now.
Is this an existing team you're inheriting, or are you starting from
No
scratch?
team. I'm here by myself.
Oh, so now it's you.
Just me.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. That's exciting. Yeah.
So
it's good you're only working a 4-day week now. That's great. So,
the reason, I'll tell you the rationale.
Yeah, go ahead.
Coming out of Aptus Conga, I did a lot of reflection, Hansei kind of stuff, self-scouting, we say in sports. And you think about what you could have done better if you get a chance to do something like that again. And one of the challenges I had in leadership was, here in Japan especially, not having done their jobs in Japan felt like an issue for me, because when push came to shove and we had to decide as a team, are we going left or are we going right? And there were a lot of points like that. It was really hard for me to sell them on my right when they wanted to go left. And they could say, yeah, but you haven't walked a mile in our shoes, so what do we do here? That was tough. So coming out of it, having the opportunity with this company, I'm a frontline guy now. I'm not managing anybody. So I do the customer support. I follow up on the tickets that come into the support system. I do the project management for implementation projects
Now, is this
myself.
something that's a temporary phenomenon, or is this the permanent solution?
Well,
Because it sounds to me like if you're going to become successful, at some point there's only so many hours in the day. Mitch is a hard worker, but there's still only so many hours in the day.
No, I'm the right amount of resource for what we have here. And this space is so niche-y. It's just CPG companies. So in Japan, there's about 70 of those over $1 billion in sales. There's 70. None of them have ever heard of us, except the ones that we already have. But we haven't done any marketing or outbound selling at all. So they don't know we're coming. They don't really know that this is even a thing to do. They know they built a system 15 years ago that they still know and love and still support, but they don't know that there's, a cloud alternative. So we're going to have to build this market, and it's going to be slow go. It's like that almost everywhere in the world, except the U.S., where this is just something to do. It's conventional wisdom that you buy this, and even small companies in the States buy it early, because that small company is run by an ex-VP from Procter & Gamble who had this. So he comes in and he says, no, I need a trade promotion management system. You got to have that to go to market. Can't do, So they buy it when they're small, and then they grow, et cetera. But in Japan, it's not really a thing to buy a cloud system to do this. And so we're going to have to educate the market and turn over these companies one by one. It's going to be a slow road. It is pretty enjoyable.
Take you into your 100th year in business, right?
Yeah, but it's work that I don't mind, because remember, I wanted to be looking at the whites of the eyes of my customers around matters of consequence, and that's what I'm doing. So,
are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Good on you. So let's, we're talking about leadership here, so let's flick back to looking at the collective experiences of leadership here you've had.
Sure.
And the different iterations you've been here. So we talked a little bit about the challenges of leading, and you've gone through some of those. But what things did you find in your travel so far was working for you to engage your Japanese teams? What worked well?
Well, a couple of things. I think one thing is you need to have the right mindset in doing that.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
It means that you need to be true to purpose.
Okay.
In however you intend to engage folks for whatever purpose that is, whatever you need to do, what your mission is, you better be committed to that yourself through and through, and not be going through the motions for some other agenda that you may have. I really want to be doing this at the APJ level, so this is my... None of that can kind of be in there, or it will get found out in Japan. People are very, I think, discerning and interested in who is this guy and what he's really about. Mm-hmm. What is he really trying to do here? Mm-hmm. And if it's something that I can relate to and I can get on board with, I'm all in, and he'll get the best of me. If it looks like it's for his own purposes, well, why should I be all in? So that's a big difference.
So his own purposes there in that context would be
climbing the corporate
stepping stone on my path to the very top, grab the brass ring over the bodies, become number one. Is that so? People differentiate between he's actually trying to build a business, he's trying to help us as a team and help himself, and we're just the sort of pawns in the game, right?
Yeah.
They can sniff it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it exactly. So that's part A. Part B is, does he actually care about me? And,
so in that sense, how does he care about me? How did you find means to make sure that people understood that you did care about them? How would they know that Mitch cared about them? What were you doing?
Time spent, intent. Mm-hmm. And this takes a number of flavors. So there's one-on-one meetings that you can do. I didn't get a lot out of lunches. It was more meetings in my office around my table. Off hours, time spent, and I think now that we're in COVID, that's become something very different. But back in the pre-COVID era, off hours time, meals, dinners, etc., was a huge part of building that relationship and that trust and that engagement with your team. And then there's
now, is this one-on-one or is a team together? Or?
All together, both.
Always team as a
both.
group?
Yeah. No, both.
Oh, both. Okay.
Yeah, both. Mm-hmm. And then there's HR stuff that's sponsored. You go do a ropes course in the mountains of Yamanashi, and you spend time together there, one-on-one groups, the whole thing. So all of that, I think, contributes to engagement. And then it's really about understanding to what degree and in what ways people are engaged, and that's a very individual thing. I only had 25 people in my team, so that's not that big of a job to know that at the individual level. But I'll say I probably didn't do as good a job then as I would now, because sometimes as a manager, there's a tendency to take your team for granted a little bit. And I don't think I was a big, I didn't do that a lot. But I think I did that a little, especially with the folks that weren't as vocal, that weren't sort of as, out there. I could have spent more time with them, I think, looking back on it. But certainly the one-on-one communication and the off-hour stuff turned out to be pretty big. I tried to limit that communication or that drinking kind of thing as much as I could. I didn't believe in it, and I thought I could get it done another way, and I was wrong.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Okay,
I came up short.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
could have done.
How did you know? How did you know you came up short? What
Because
told
when I would, so rather than maybe going out every month, I would go out every 4 or 5 months. There'd be a volcano of feedback coming my way.
Now, is that a good idea to avoid that or to encourage that?
You want to encourage it. It's real. It's what people are really thinking and feeling about what's going on. And this happened to 2 companies. It happened both at SAP and Aptus Congo, where I intentionally sort of backed off that kind of stuff and then would sort of lean into it a little bit more. And I realized I should have been doing this all along. So I'm pretty convinced that at least pre-COVID, it was a key to really getting close to people. And I think it was as simple as folks here are less apt to give you straight, unvarnished feedback from the heart in the office. It's just not, some people do, but it's not as common as it is in the States, where you have a meeting, you hash it out, boom, off we go. We're aligned, It's not quite that simple here, I think.
Anything else you found apart from the 2 you mentioned already that worked well in getting engagement?
Engagement, I think like performance or like innovation or anything like that characteristics, there's some people that just don't want to be all in on the job. They want to have a good job and do a good job, and they want their private life, and they kind of want to be left alone. And you need to respect that. Not everyone's going to be sort of in cheerleader mode and, let's win the basketball game with 2 seconds left on the clock. And not everybody wants to sign up for that, and that's okay, especially if they're really good at what they do. Then, they'll have less engagement, but they'll still perform and add a lot of value.
What about one of the preconditions for getting creativity and innovation in the business at any level and any section is that people care, and that's, if the engagement is there and they care, then okay, let's build a bit of mousetrap because I care. But if I don't care, well, I'll stick with the mousetrap we've got. I couldn't care less. So if you've got engagement at some level anyway, it's opening the door to innovation. So what did you find worked well in terms of getting ideas and creativity and innovation from the team? And I don't mean R&D necessarily, but I'm just talking about, it could be in any aspect of the business.
Yeah. So engagement's a wonderful platform to start that. But say back at SAP, this was in 2010, techniques like design thinking, which is really just advanced, really organized brainstorming, and those kinds of solutions were just coming into sort of the business lexicon here in Japan, et cetera. And SAP made a big deal of driving that internally and also with our customers early on. This was 12 years ago. Now it's kind of well known, and I think a lot of companies in Japan are doing stuff like that. But back then it wasn't the case. And so finding new ways to communicate and to relate to each other and bring out ideas, discuss those ideas, prioritize them, package them, and then put together a plan. That was a lot of exciting work that we were doing at the time that helped really move us from not really innovative to more innovative. I wouldn't say that this is always the most innovative culture around. Of course there's innovation in Japan, there's a lot. But if you look across the board, at least in our company, speaking about SAP, for example, the reaction in Southeast Asia or India was immediate and powerful. And people here needed to spend more time with ideas before they were willing to put them out there and say, let's go for it and let's do this. They really wanted to think it through thoroughly first, rather than just getting a bunch of stuff on the wall. Now, this whole design thinking wave and 12 years have gone by, and so I think things have changed. But back in those days, people were more hesitant just to put new ideas up on the board. What if it's a bad idea, and what does that say about me? And all kinds of thinking is one bucket of thinking. Another bucket is folks here tend to take their job and their responsibility so seriously for the most part that if you say to a staff member, what about this? In the States, the staff member will probably say, got it. All right, I'll work on it. And
off they go.
Off they go, and you think, oh, problem solved. In a week, I'm going to have a plan.
And you will have a plan.
You'll have a plan.
Yeah.
In Japan, when you ask that question, the head is spinning because they're thinking of all the things they need to do to make that happen right there in the moment. They're thinking, okay, I got to get these 13 people on board, and I need to do this.
And they're also thinking all the things that are going to go wrong.
Yes.
And they're predisposed to focus on all the things that go wrong first.
Right.
I'm always shocked by that. You know, when I have the same thing with my team, I'll come with an idea.
Yeah.
And then all I'll get is this long laundry list of why this is going to be dangerous or risky, or this could possibly go wrong, or that could possibly go wrong. And
right.
This one person said this, and therefore, you know, and being an Aussie, you know, I always challenge that. Well, how many people said that's a problem?
Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had an audience of one. Is that a survey of one? Is that why we're not going to do it? I'm a bit, you know, I push back on that. But anyway, I take your point.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of that stems from wanting to make things perfect before you, and so.
Where does that come from? This is why I want to make things perfect.
I don't know culturally when that came into the culture here. It predates business, I think. It's probably at that depth. Kaizen came out of that. I mean, it's a non-stop. I have this every day. So one of our large customers will hit me with a bug or a issue, what have you, and we'll solve it. And immediately I'll get an email back saying, well, there's this other thing. And it's kind of, and it never stops. And so you really have to put boundaries around that stuff, because there is a gene that drives for continuous, endless improvement. And in order to know what needs to get fixed, you need to look at that part of the glass that's half empty. And so people spend a lot of time or attention on that. And I think there's a lot of good in there. I think where it can hold teams back is in the area of just completely new innovation, you know, out there kind of stuff. When you offer up that what's missing, what's not going to work, who's not going to approve it, those comments bring with them a certain amount of gravity, of Newtonian gravity with them in the meeting. And it's really hard for the leader or anyone else who's facilitating to kind of deal with that gravity and then get to the stars with the positive stuff. That's a really hard challenge. So that's a downside of the Kaizen stuff, is that I think it holds back that sort of just brand new white space, blue ocean. What do we do with this?
Leapfrogging technologies, leapfrogging systems, leapfrogging the current thinking. And not going incrementally, but going boom, we're over here.
So it's one reason why the list of Japan-based companies that are leading in tech now isn't very long. So if you look at the most valuable tech companies in the world, they're pretty much all from Silicon Valley, which is all about the leapfrog. Everyone that lives there and works there is focused on the leapfrog from morning to night. And Japan's not. And that's okay. It's a wonderful place. I live here, I work here, I love it. But it's not necessarily a leapfrog kind of place, I think.
And so what are the other things you found in terms of getting people's ideas to come out and get them implemented, or at least get them out?
You know, really, I don't think it's very hard. I think if you come in with an open approach and strong assurances that any idea is a good idea at this point, there will be no repercussions for ideas that, you know, and just make that point really strongly and carry forward. The techniques around ideation now are pretty well understood. all that's really happening. So
Did you use design thinking per se as a methodology?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, it became immediately overnight. It became part of the lifeblood of SAP globally. So you just adopt it and off you go.
So how does design thinking work here in Japan? How did you apply that?
It works the same around the world, where basically you get a bunch of ideas up on the whiteboard. You have a number of steps you go through to focus that list, and you build plans at the end of it. I'm not doing justice to what design thinking is. That was a really short summary. But for me, it's just well-organized kind of creative brainstorming. That's the way I think of it. But there's a process, and there's a cookbook, and you do this this 3 times, not 2, and so it gets teams through to where they want to go. It's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thinking about trust.
Yeah.
Getting trust, because you've had, you sort of coming in and taking over an existing team, you're building a team from zero.
Yeah.
There's different elements of trust in that. But what
Yeah.
have you found worked well in getting trust with the team?
Trust is, I think, really fundamental here and really important. So if a leader's
different to the States, is it not fundamental in the States?
It's important everywhere, but I consider it life or death here. And so I'd make that point to anyone coming.
And why is that?
Well, and just to compare to Silicon Valley is really all about achievement for a payday, a payoff at the end. That's, I'm netting it out. Extreme innovation, extreme achievement for a large payoff. And if this all works, the CEO is going to be rich and he can retire. The VPs are going to do really well. The directors might get part of a house down payment. And the new grad at the front desk is going to get a new car. And that's kind of, honestly, the froth and now no one might say that I kind of think that's what's going on. And then it is fun to go after this new thing that hasn't been done, go to the moon, business-wise, and see if you can make that happen. And so it's trust is important and all that, but there's a lot of else going on. Here, my team didn't have stock options from so their context is completely different. And other things will become more important. And I think Japan is kind of a long game culture in many ways.
What are those other things which would become important?
Trust, listening, walking the talk. Of course, all these things will come out of a business book in the States too, but I'm just saying they're more
sort of more magnified here or more amplified here.
Yeah. The getting rich quick stuff is kind of not. So what are you left with? You're left with the good old, frankly, what Dale Carnegie talked about a lot. Those are the things that you're left with here and that were true 100 years ago. It's those good old values that I think were part of the reason I was attracted to Japan in the first place. Doing what you say you're going to do, listening, not going out of your way to inconvenience others. That whole meiwaku thing is
consideration of others.
Consideration of others. All that stuff I think is really important in building a foundation for trust. And then it's just how you perform as a leader. Do you show up every day? Are you about the business? Are you about them? All that stuff. It's not magic, but it's also not getting distracted by other stuff that can come into a management or leadership milieu or context.
Like what?
The ladder climbing that we talked about, or whatever it may be.
Status, or car park next to the entrance or something like that.
Spending all day at the American Club, in the gym, maybe not meeting with customers or what have you. I mean, the various flavors.
I should try that one day, see how that goes.
Yeah.
Could be good.
Yeah.
So what about culture? Because you've worked for some organisations which have had an existing culture.
Yeah.
Internationally or even domestically.
Yeah.
And then you always have that umbrella culture, but then it's in Japan. So you've got Japanese culture, and then you've also got your interpretation and adjustment of that sort of umbrella culture down to the reality of the team culture.
Yeah.
So what have you found worked well in terms of building a strong culture here?
So I think it's a lot of the things we've talked about already in terms of engagement and trust and those things as a foundation. But culture, what is culture? I'm not an anthropologist, but it's values and behavior. Let's just say it's those two things. And having an articulation of what your shared values are and how you're going to manifest those in actual behavior, I think is a really good thing. To not leave that unsaid, but to put it, out there on paper and amongst each other in discussion. So any company that I've always been a part of, until recently, where the companies have gotten smaller and they don't spend a lot of time on articulating stuff like that, and there's no programs or anything. But back when I was with larger companies, there's always sort of a culture that you inherit in writing from.
Exactly. Beautifully framed on the wall.
And overall leadership will drive that. Now, what that isn't a meeting and a speech and then you're done. You're not done. The culture work starts from there. And I'm not sure I always got this right, but if I had to do it over again, Greg, here's what I'd do. I'd say, okay, let's put what corporate just gave us aside. What kind of culture do we want for ourselves here in Japan? What do we want? And let's talk about that. What do we want our shared values to be, and how are we going to manifest ourselves in behaviors? Are we going to show up at the office every day at 9 a.m. or are we not? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If someone doesn't, does that mean they're slacking or does it not? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the way down the line. And then you look at that, what you build as a team, and you say, okay, now we have this. Now let's look at what we got from corporate. As a matter of fact, these three things map really closely. As it turns out, the professionalism we said we wanted, the overachievement of our goals that we said we wanted, the mutual trust and respect that in fact, I see all that back here with the corporate stuff. And I think to bring it around that way, to make it a Japan-centric thing first, but to marry it actively to what is a way to get better buy-in from the folks here so that it doesn't feel like the company magazine of the month kind of thing, which doesn't really get people excited here.
Often when you do those exercises where you have to come up with values, your own particular values.
Yeah.
And you come up with an extraordinarily big list, it's 30, 40 these particular values. And then the hard part is, okay, now you have to distill that down to what are the key values for you, which is often a very difficult process. But my point is that probably there's a common set of values that we can all sort of agree that are important.
Yeah.
We may make particular, selections between one and the other, but they're always like giddy very close.
Yeah.
So it's probably not that big a gap between what the collective value system design in headquarters would be with a potential list of values that would be important here. Yeah. The thing I always find amusing though is when we go to teach leadership and we have these sorts of things, I'll take that stuff off the wall, I'll turn it around, I'll say, okay, what's the vision of the company?
Yeah.
What's the vision of the company?
Yeah.
For 30 people in the class, what are the values? Usually there's 5 values, right? Collectively, the 30 people come up with about 2 or 3. And I always say to them, well, guys, the people in the executive suite here have crafted all this stuff, and they think this stuff is going all the way from the very top to the very bottom, and you guys are the middle management, and your job is to amplify and explain this to the people below you. But if you can't even remember it, how on earth are you going to live that? And it's something that's never occurred to them. They just see it in the frame and they think, oh yeah, it's oblivious. They don't actually inculcate that into themselves. So there's always that, I think, illusion from the very top leadership that they think we're on the same page here. Everyone understands we've published it, we promote it, we keep communicating it, but actually, what's the reality?
Yeah.
And that's often, I think, is a gap between, and I know myself, I think, I sent out the email.
Yeah.
And then a week later, something pops up, you go, what are you asking me that for? I told you in the email.
Yeah.
Haven't read the email or didn't digest the email or don't remember the email or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So this is so important because that vision really should be our North Star
Exactly.
in a company or even our personal vision.
Yeah.
And so, again, to a team, I would say, that vision really is our North Star. And as long as we're pointed toward that, we're good. There's a lot of detail that's going to change below that. And then even, Mr. Teammate, your personal vision, first of all, do you have one? And secondly, are you loyal to it now working here? And if you're not, how do you get closer to it? And what I'm doing now is kind of in sync with my personal vision, which is to help bring cloud-based innovation to Japan from outside. I think I'm uniquely capable to do that. And what I'm doing supports that. So that means I don't need to get distracted by new job opportunities on LinkedIn or whatever it may be. There's distractions all around us.
After this podcast goes out, mate, all the recruiters will be calling you going.
But I mean, even as having a personal vision helps you stay true to that and on course and not have doubt about what you're doing. You can change it and you can do something else, but you need to change your vision first, I think.
And what about advice? If someone was going to be sent to Japan, you go to Japan, run the operation there. Based on your experience, if you were to give them some hints, some advice, some pointers, what would you tell them?
Yeah. So I've got a lot to say on this topic. Japan is very different, as you know well. I can give some specifics, culturally. If you think back to a negotiation book that came out over 10 years ago, is Getting to Yes, right? So that came out like 15 years ago.
Yeah, I read that book.
Yeah. So then Harvard Business Review did an article 5 or so years ago on getting to height, da, etc. And what they did is they mapped cultures along a couple of key dimensions. There's many dimensions that are key, but 2 of them are conflict okay, conflict avoid. That's a big one. Next dimension is expressive and emotional, reserved. And if you map by country different cultures along those dimensions, interestingly, you get different countries in each bucket. So just because someone's expressive doesn't mean they like conflict. Folks in the Philippines tend to be pretty expressive, not big on direct conflict. Folks in Germany, right, not so expressive, okay with conflict. They'll tell you that your engineering solution is wrong. Right to your face, but they won't do it in an emotional way. Folks may be in Israel, big on both. So they're going to tell you that they don't like your engineering solution, and they're going to do it very expressively. Russia's up there, etc. Japan's off the curve, opposite of that. So people here tend to not like direct conflict, and they're not emotionally expressive. So that's the milieu you're coming into. That's the environment you're coming into. Know that people may have great ideas, but they're not going to be putting them out there because that's just not their way. And so you need to draw them out and give them space and time. Don't get uncomfortable with long silences in meetings, whether they be internal or external. That's okay. And for example, I've become very comfortable with long silences.
How long can you last with a long silence?
Nobody can outlast me.
I went an hour once. Seriously, I went an hour.
So I've never had to do an hour.
I didn't set out to do an hour. Actually, I just wrote an article for Forbes called "Silence is Golden in Japan," and I retold this story.
Yeah.
That I was visiting a branch when I was at Shinsei, and there was some conflict between one of the workers, one of the young women there, and her quite a bit older boss. And so I said, look, I heard you may have some things you want to talk about here. And then I very, thoughtfully just sat and just waited, thinking, a couple of minutes. And then it was like 5 minutes, it was 15 minutes. I'm thinking, no, this can't go on this much longer. Then it was like 25 minutes. She's bound to tell me something soon. Then it was 40 minutes. I can't believe this is 40 minutes. And I'm silent. She's silent. There's no nothing going on.
And you're not sweating or you're cool?
No, I'm fine. I'm comfortable because I've been here a long time. I'm used to it, but I'm
yeah.
not used to it going that long.
Sure.
And I'm thinking to myself, am I going to die in this room of old age? What's going on here? Is she ever going to speak to me? And at the hour, she said, I can't tell you. That was the end of the meeting. And we just parted. But I realised you could last an hour or longer if you had to. So that was my default now, that I know I can at least last 1 hour and sit there in silence with no particular drama on my side.
So you were way past me. You just described the ultra marathon compared to my 5Ks, but the 5Ks, the minute silences in meetings come up a lot. And so I would say anyone coming into that, know that doesn't mean things are going south. Don't stress out inside. It may be going south, may not, but don't stress out about it. And getting back to what we talked about earlier about people always wanting to be so thorough in what they give you in terms of comments and feedback, etc., that's what they're cooking on right there. And so give them time and space to do that. And what you get out of them may be really insightful and executable. Because remember, you said, you'll get a plan in a week, Mitch, back to my experience in the States. And you will get a plan in a week, but it may not be executable. The plans here tend to be more executable because people are really thinking it through. So that would be part of my advice is know that it's going to be very different, because it is, and it's okay. Great things happen here all the time. And two, though, it may happen at a more methodical fashion or pace than people are used to. It's not really a zigzaggy, hectic culture here. It's more, what's the straight line and why don't we take that? Isn't that the most efficient way to get things done? It would be the question folks here would ask. Okay, let's do that, but it takes time to develop that straight line.
What else? What other advice would you give them?
Yeah, and also just to appreciate people's context. So, there's cultural differences, and all of that is true. But it may be as simple as this team doesn't have stock options and you have a lot that you brought with you from the home office. And if that's there, just know that these folks are in the game for different reasons than your team was back in the States, as an example. And be prepared to work with them in their context, because that's what's going to govern their behavior and their thoughts. But there's so much upside to managing teams here. Loyalty can be amazing. Execution can be amazing. People delivering what they say they're going to deliver on time, on budget, amazing. Taking missteps and mishaps really seriously and correcting them as soon as possible. All of that makes getting work here really fun and pleasurable a lot of the time, as opposed to just stuff not happening and festering for months, which you can have in other markets.
What about, finding out about mistakes? Because I've always felt that many of the teams I've worked with are like just amazing ninja level of hiding problems from the boss until they get to a point where they can't hide it from the boss anymore and they have to come and tell you. But if they can sort of take it out the back and garrote it and not show you, you'll never know. But then finally you get the problem and it's like, it's too late now, because I've got the money, I've got the authority, I've got the power, but I don't have the time to fix it. You need to bring that to me earlier and I'll work with you, we'll fix it. Trying to get that idea across. What's your experience been?
Yeah. So in between giving people time and space to do what they need to do and not being too quick, in Silicon Valley mode all the time, is the need to flesh that stuff out sooner rather than later. And I've had the same experience. And what I didn't do well in those situations earlier on in my career is deal with the silence. So you come into a conversation or a meeting and you say, we haven't heard from prospect XYZ, in a couple weeks. Is there an issue there? And sometimes I would get just silence back, kind of like you're looking at me right now and so I'm not stressed out, but I let time go by and the interaction ends without an answer. And I walk away to maybe my conversation with my boss where I have to make up something to report because I didn't get anything. And so if I had to do it again, I would in the nicest possible way so I don't destroy trust or come off like a power harassment guy or anything like that. But to say, okay, ground rules, I'm not leaving this conversation until we get something that we agree on, 1 or 2 sentences. What's going on with prospect XYZ? The deal's gone south. We don't have it. Whatever it turns out to be.
It won't be good news, that's for sure. That's not going to be good news.
Yeah, because people come back with good news and blare it to everybody in the office, right? So whatever. I didn't take that extra step of forcing a response quietly and calmly. I was frankly a little bit intimidated by the silence that I could deal with better with customers, but I was always surprised when I would get it from my own team, and I didn't always force an answer right then. Okay, I don't know. Okay, well, but if you did know, what would you say? What's your best guess? Yeah.
Do you get that sort of, I'm going to use the word flippant, because I'm struggling to think of a better word, but you'll get that type of, okay, yes, boss, yes, boss, yes, boss type of response, which is actually telling you, no, I don't agree, I'm not going to do it, or, yeah, okay, I didn't deliver, but I'm not taking any responsibility for it. I'm just giving you some tatemae, some sort of superficial response to keep you happy, but actually I've not reflected on my lack of ability to get the job done on time, as promised, when you expected me to do it, and I don't want to take any responsibility for my failure. So I'll just give you some sort of, words that'll somehow let us move on from this conversation too. I get that sometimes too.
The yes boss thing ties into the meaning of hi here.
Yeah, hi.
Because all my communication was in Japanese. And so people coming in should know the hi, as you know, is better than anybody. It doesn't mean yes. All it means is I've heard you. Yeah, and it can be a blow-off expression too, like hi, you're getting blown off. And there, all I could do is, if it's life or death, I got to lock horns and flesh that out. And if not, let it pass, because you can't lock horns and everything.
You can't.
Yeah.
What about your definition of leadership, Mitch?
Yeah, so there's been a fair amount out in the world on leadership, a few books published.
I'm writing one at the moment on leadership.
I'm not sure. Leadership in Japan would be a great topic.
That's what I'm doing. I'm writing a book on...
perfect.
I've got my Japan... presentations mastery, Japan sales mastery, Japan business mastery.
Yeah.
So the next one in English will be Japan leadership mastery, but that's going to take me about a year, I think.
Yeah. No, I read the sales book cover to cover at the time, and probably still is. It was the only book in English on selling here, and I thought it was really well done. And I'm not yeah.
Appreciate that. And the funny thing is, the previous book was the Japanese Negotiator, which was written 30 years ago, plus now, maybe 35 years ago, by another Australian.
Yeah.
A long time ago that book was written, and there's been nothing written. Yeah.
So the culture's changed, right? Even just things like Facebook and Instagram. Japan's getting less Japan-like every year. Now, it's starting from a place that's very different than the West, so it's not there yet. But so things have changed in 30 years. And the Japanese Negotiator... It sounds kind of confrontational. I don't know if that was kind of the overall...
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
No.
It was just talking about, probably the publishers chose the title.
Yeah.
And the guy's writing a book on sales, basically. But anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, coming back to your
to my definition of leadership, I try to net it out to something that's as succinct and simple as possible that I can perhaps even remember. So for me, leadership is engaging others to achieve the previously unachievable. And I think if you can get that done, the engagement part we've talked about a lot, and what are you trying to do if not achieve the previously unachievable? You're trying to do more, you're trying to do better, you're trying to do new, whatever flavor you're trying to do. You haven't got it done so far, and you got to get it done. You want to get it done. And so how do you do that? I think that's the crux of leadership. And yeah, there's a lot more to be said about leadership than I can say, but that's short enough that even I can remember it and try to follow it as much as possible.
It's very succinct and very powerful. All right, Mitch, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate it.
So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.